Hi, thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to share what we have today with you. And I don't take it lightly that you've come. We all care, though, and that's why we're here. 6 strategies to love and protect your pets without having the constant feeling you need to apologize. Because aren't they the most lovely thing on the planet? And it's not just our pets, it's all animals out there, all nature. Isn't it such a beautiful thing to behold? And yet, a lot of people don't seem to have any kind of feeling for that. And then we need to apologize, or we feel the need to apologize that we're taking up so much space with those that we love. But do we really? Now, have you ever stood at the door and wondered if your cat would come home? And when somebody was asking you, you would just say you're fine because you were too afraid to show them how much you really worried? Or has it ever happened to you that you woke up in the middle of the night because you were so worried what happened to this little dog that you saw that was being abused, and you were wondering what to do and how you could help it? Or you were afraid to go after a good opportunity, maybe a job opportunity, because you were afraid to move because you weren't sure how your pets would be received, but you wouldn't tell anyone because you didn't want people to think of you as silly or as weak. Well, then this course is for you because there's nothing wrong with you. Absolutely nothing. You're neither weak nor are you silly. And there's nothing wrong with the caring deeply for those we love deeply. There's nothing wrong with loving those who don't happen to be human. And starting with our pets, but continue with wild animals and whatever nature we have in front of our doors, if it's the trees or whatever, there is nothing weak in showing that love, and it is time to come out. It is time to stop hiding. It is time to show that we care. There has never been a better time to show the world how we care. There has never been a greater awareness that humans aren't the only ones precious on this planet, and that when we humans want to survive, we have to make sure that everybody else survives as well, and everybody else is fine as well. And the only difference between you and those others is that they don't feel it. They may know it intellectually if they've done some research, but they don't feel it, and you do. And that is nothing to be ashamed of. That is actually a good development. That is actually a further development. So just that you know that whoever thought that love is weak has never stood between a bear and a bear cub. And how many stories have we heard of people who really cared for their children, for example, and died for them? Love is one of the strongest emotions in the world, and it is an absolute asset. And it is time that we stop thinking of it as a weakness only because people have used it in the past to attack us. Now, this course is to show you some tools how to head off aggression before it even starts, because every one of us has had this before, that we were afraid because people were attacking us because of our animals, or because of our pets, or that we saw people hurt animals and we couldn't do anything about that. And sometimes people just are afraid to say something and they start hiding, and I did this for a long time. And sometimes they just don't have the strategy. When I first came out and I decided I have to say something, I have to do something, and I just got really aggressive because it was the only strategy that I knew. But there are other strategies out there, and I discovered them, and some of them are amazingly effective to head off aggression before it actually starts. And some of them are really hidden and not obvious. And I'd really like to share them with you because they may help you too. And if I help you feel better about this, and then I help other animals as well. And I care about all nature. I care about all animals. And if you help, we can build a community where we all help each other and we all help animals, and it's going to be a much more beautiful planet. It is already a very beautiful planet. There's so many more people who have started to care, who have started to come out, and it's a movement, and we want to be part of it. Okay, so are you in? Are you with me? Wonderful. So let's start. So there are these strategies again, and I wanted to show you what you will get in this course. Let me just go and pull it up real quick. So the outcome at the end of this course is that you have the confidence to stand up for what you believe in without apologizing. And that is really important. So there are three external strategies for heading off issues or dealing with issues, but there's also three internal strategies that help you get to the point that these external strategies are actually working. And the benefit to you and your loved ones is that both humans and animals of your loved ones and other life, and even the people that you meet who there could have been a conflict with, will benefit. So it's a win-win-win. And that has proven to be the best strategy out there to make sure that you get people on board, because a lot of people, most people, 70% actually, no matter how much you think that they are, or how much they talk about family or whatever, are really about themselves. And if you get themselves, if you at least also get a benefit for them, you will be able to enroll them much better. Before we go into this, I just wanted to tell you where I'm coming from, because for a long, long time, I was hiding in plain sight. Have you ever done this before, that you were hiding in plain sight? Nobody around understood me. They kind of liked animals, but not the way that I did. And sometimes I was in a physically unsafe environment, so I was afraid to even speak up for myself. So I spoke up, but I spoke up too little and too late. And I felt I had to apologize because I was a burden on people when I had pets. Have you ever felt like this? That you kind of felt that you were taking up space that you weren't supposed to because somebody gave you that feeling? I was like that for a long time, and then three things happened. And the first thing that happened that really shook me up was I was living in a physically unsafe place. I had grown up in a very, very safe place where there hadn't been a murder for like 10 years. And I think there were a couple of rapes in like 10 years or something in the entire district, you know. And then I moved somewhere where it was much, much unsafer. It was in London. It was in a bad area. It was where a drug lord had just moved, and I didn't know about it until the police knocked on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was feeling very, very unsafe myself. And then I saw this dog who was treated really badly by the owners, but it was because they didn't know how to treat a dog. They had just been told by another shop owner that they should have a dog to protect them, but they didn't know. So they got this pit bull basically, and just chained him, that little puppy, to the chair, and always punished him when he just moved, right? So I asked them, can I go out with him and take him for a walk and then exercise him and stuff. Anyway, long story short, I exercised him for several weeks, and then they suddenly didn't let me anymore because he was so boisterous when he was coming back with me, although I was walking with him for 2 or 3 hours, and they wanted him to be quiet, and they didn't let me in anymore. And anyway, I called the RSPCA because I saw that they had just trained him down, and he was really suffering. And they said, we don't send people into that area because it's too dangerous. And I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. And I waited and I waited and I couldn't sleep. And I at some point I called the police, and I thought somebody needs to do something. There's not something, because I had actually gone to that shop and they let me see him again, and he was chained to the radiator. At that point, he was sitting in his own shit, and I saw in his eyes he'd gone crazy. And I was even afraid to touch him, and I didn't. And I thought I just couldn't live with that. So I called the police, I think a month later or something, and they told me, well, you were too late. They called us 2 weeks ago. They told us he was a stray dog and then he'd bitten somebody, and we put him down. He was one of the most beautiful little dogs I've seen, and he was so loving initially when I had him. And I was too late. I was too late by 2 weeks. And I don't know if I could have saved him because he wasn't mine, and it was dangerous in that area. But that was the first time where I thought, okay, this isn't working. But I didn't know how to change it. And people told me, oh, well, you couldn't have done anything. Anyway, so I had a cat, which I had rescued, who was a really cute little tiger cat. And I wanted to keep him safe. So before I went to Canada, I moved into the country into a little farm. And I thought that was the right thing to do because we had been at a busy London street, and that is where I rescued him. My neighbors, he had fallen out of the window, and they just wanted to let him die, basically. So I took him in. But anyway, so I thought he was finally safe, and 2 months later, he gets run over on the only street around, which is 100 meters away, where there are two or three cars a day. And have you ever had that? That you thought you're finally safe and you've done the right thing, and then that turns out to be the most horrible thing that happened. I mean, it was devastating. And he wasn't just a cat to me. He was, have you had that, that you've got some animals who seem to be almost like human? He was like the person who was supposed to be in my life, but wasn't, but it was like his soul was there. He was like my little angel. I mean, a lot of people say that they were saved by their animals. I don't know how much they actually mean it, but I do mean it. I was saved by that animal because I was in a bad space at the time. I was very scared. Um, and he taught me to turn my life around, and he gave me love, and he when he sat on my chest, all that pressure lifted, and suddenly he was gone. My little angel was gone. Yeah, so the worst thing about this whole thing was that I realized I had a friend there, and I had told him to please drive really slowly up the driveway. And he was, one of these masculine men that you find in England sometimes, who, if you tell them what to do, they're just doing the opposite. And the next time I saw him racing up the track, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to pick a fight, right? And he was just staring at me, and I'm okay. And I didn't want to um, affect the friendship either. And then Kato was dead, and the way that I found him, he had clearly been placed on the road, on the side of the road. He couldn't have just fallen there himself. And I was wondering if it was my friend who did that. Have you ever had that? That you've got this nagging suspicion and you don't want to think badly about somebody, but you think maybe the person that you trusted may have. And this time it was my cat. It wasn't somebody else's. It was mine, right? So anyway, it was devastating. But I shortly thereafter we went to Canada, and I got a couple of new kittens for the remaining cat who was really distraught. And at this time, I made sure that we're going to be safe. I mean, this is what you do. Have you ever done this? When you've really fallen down somewhere and you really hurt yourself, you make sure the next time it's going to be okay, right? So I did that too. We didn't move to Vancouver, although I worked there, but moved outside a little bit. So I had to drive a little bit more, but at least they were safe, right? They were in an apartment. We were up the hill. There were only like two neighbors past. They had these beautiful big woods where they could go and forage, and they loved it. And for months it was great. Yeah, there were wild animals there, but that's just normal. And they were young cats, and they loved it, right? It was really, really beautiful. I thought, okay, now we're finally safe. And then one day I'm coming home, and I see that all the cats inside are destroyed. And so at that point, I have three cats, and I had just rescued some cats, which the neighbor had just left, and she left. She had been bullied by the neighborhood, and she had just left because it was one of these weird winters where in Vancouver it's usually not that cold, but it was minus 20 degrees, and inside her house was totally, you know, coming down around her ears, and inside her house there was like ice on the floor, and they came into me. And I told my landlords, hey, I've called her, she's moved away, she's not coming back, I'm just rehoming those animals, and I need to vaccinate them first, because otherwise they're going to get sick if I put them to the shelter, if I rehome them somewhere. Anyway, it seems they didn't believe me, and they just decided, apparently, and that was the first time that this suspicion, and I couldn't actually shake this suspicion anymore. They had brought one of their dogs, who was a cat killer, into the apartment while I was away trying to chase them out. There were my cats in there, and there were the other cats in there, and they got out through the cat flap. They it If they had had somewhere else to go, they would have probably run away, but it was minus 20 degrees. I was the only food around. And then it turns out there was another one over there, and I rescued her as well. I couldn't find the kitten. It was later found dead. And when I rescued her, the other neighbors set their dog on me. And that cat was so cold that she didn't even move, although that dog was right in front of her and trying to. He didn't bite me in the end, but it was a little bit of touch and go. You know, I didn't know that dog well. It was relatively big, and I had my hands full. And I finally got the neighbor to call him off, and I went in. So anyway, so came home, and then I saw what had happened, and I felt so helpless because I had to go to work the next day. You know, nothing had happened, but I knew they could be doing this again, but I was too afraid to confront them. I was too afraid to go upstairs. They had a key, and there was nothing I could do, and I felt so helpless. Right? In the end, somebody called the SPCA, told them some horror story and stuff, and I had to bring them, and they almost died there because two of them got sick, and the other one got so scared by the dogs that were around, and I ended up going to that shelter 2 or 3 months, basically every day or every other day, and it had a good ending, but that was just an experience. I mean, there was a good things that came out of it because while they were lying about what I was doing, I mean, have you ever had this that you're just trying to help? You're the only one who's trying to help. Everybody else is just keeping their eyes closed or bullying somebody, and then they spread lies about you. I had been at that point rescuing animals and working in rescue places, and then I was so offended. It was so unfair, and it also almost cost the life of all three of those cats because two got really, really sick. One of them ended up not eating anymore, and I realized that he couldn't breathe, and that's why he couldn't smell the food. So I put food into his mouth. He started eating again, and when I went to the shelter after a week, because they didn't let me see them for a week, they had almost put one down already because she was so scared, and they thought that they couldn't keep her there. And I actually managed to, I got her out. She was shaking when I was getting her out, and I was putting her on my arm, and she calmed down. And then she saw, okay, the dogs, I can hear them, but they can't get in. There's actually glass in between. And it's actually a beautiful shelter. And after they realized that what was said about me was totally wrong, they let me in every day, and they were really friendly to me, and they actually wanted me to stay, but after the 2 or 3 months or something, when the three cats were rehomed, I actually left Canada then. But it had a good thing because while I was there, I was petting all the other cats as well because they were all free in that shelter, and they had their adoption rate apparently rose for 30% because all the other cats, because they were being petted all the day, every day, were much more friendly to visitors, so they got much more adoption. So that was a good thing about that. But that was really, I mean, I knew something needed to change, so I went back to England, and I didn't have much money at the time, but I knew I had to find my own place. I had to find a way to get my own place, and although I came with quite substantial debt. 6 months later, I had a house and I had a mortgage, and I built myself a big fence. I basically built myself a fortress. Have you ever had that? That you feel so that everything's closing in so much that you just hide and you put yourself into your igloo, and you make sure that nobody comes in anymore. And I thought I was safe. I thought, I rescued a few more animals, and I thought I was safe. But of course, I wasn't. Turns out there was a neighbor who had some issues, not only with me, but his ex-wife, and he wasn't allowed to see his ex-wife and his son either by court order. And there were reasons for that. And of course, if somebody is a bully, he ends up bullying your pets as well. And in the end, there were several, again, three things stand out, but there were several really nasty situations. And at some point, it was just, have you ever had this? No matter what you do, no matter how much money you spend, no matter how much energy you put into the effort, nothing works. Have you ever had that before? Nothing works, right? And in the end, one of my pets actually got poisoned by somebody because of him. And before that, for 10 years, I was afraid for my animals because there were so many threats there. And that was, again, when I decided something needed to change. Nothing had worked before, so I did an analysis. What had I done? I mean, if I take a look, I had been nice and tried to be nice to people, and I tried to please people. That hadn't worked at all, with especially not with the bullies. Hiding hadn't worked. Building a fortress hadn't worked. And then I thought, okay, something has worked, because at one point I actually completely exploded because I just couldn't keep it in anymore. And then he suddenly left me alone for a while, and that had worked. But then, of course, he got sneaky and then got the animal killed and poisoned, which I couldn't do anything about. But reversing the energy had somehow worked. And then things escalated again because there was Brexit, and that killed my business, which means I couldn't pay the house anymore. So I had to sell the house. I managed to sell it, but then I only had a caravan, and I couldn't have a fortress anymore. And even with a fortress, it hadn't worked. And so I realized something needed to change. And that is when I realized, okay, reversing the energy forward. I mean, that's what they do, right? In war, if there's a war, you don't wait for the enemy to come to you, you go to the enemy. And at that point, I was thinking of basically everybody else as my enemy, right? But then I realized, okay, if I go out with aggression, like a lot of animal lovers do nowadays as well, because it's the only strategy we know initially, then I will get aggression back, and at some point they will just crush me, right? So I needed to find another strategy, and then I realized I went to this personal development event. And have you ever had this, that somebody suddenly shows up, and you pray and you don't know what to do anymore, and suddenly somebody shows up and shows you a way? There's a mentor. Well, for me, that was Tony Robbins, and he showed up. I by accident saw his documentary "I Am Not Your Guru" online, and turns out he was speaking in London 2 weeks later. Not even in his own event, but in an event that was much cheaper. And I ended up in the second row, and that was a life changing event. And one of the things that came out of it was that he convinced me that I had to go out again, because at that point I was just hiding, and that was so unnatural for me, because years before, I was a skydiver. When I grew up, I was a gymnast. I was, a ski racer. I was always out with people. I mean, there wasn't a night where I wasn't out somewhere in the community or in a church or somewhere and doing things, right? And suddenly I wasn't going out anymore. I wasn't daring to go out. Even the only times I went out was to work and to go jogging, but otherwise I didn't dare to go out anymore. And that was so unnatural. I only realized how unnatural it was when he got me to come to one of his events in America. So I flew to America, and I realized I was afraid to rent a car. I had, for some stupid reason, I had booked the wrong hotel, right? And so suddenly I was 3 kilometers away from the event, so I had to find a way to get there. And I wanted to rent a car, and I was too afraid to drive. I mean, a skydiver years before, and then I'm too afraid to drive. I mean, that was just not me, but I was so afraid that I actually bought myself a skateboard and tried to skateboard there instead, because I thought that maybe I'm not going to kill someone or myself or whatever. I almost killed myself with that skateboard, though, and I then found some people who actually drove me. I mean, it was insane. But I remember that a year later, when I went to an event again, and I drove past in my rental car, and I thought, what on earth happened to you that you were so afraid to rent a car? You know? And at that point, I had done a meetup, and that was the other thing that I decided, okay, I need to go out. I need to find allies. I need to find, there must be other foreigners around who also have pets, who need people, who maybe I can help them. And if that was one of the things Tony Robbins said a lot of times, if you have a problem yourself, then go out and try to help other people who have the same problem or are worse off. So I thought, okay, maybe if I help other people, maybe we can build a community or something. So I designed this meetup and did a bit of marketing like I had learned there, and I thought nobody's going to sign up anyway. But then people signed up, and it wasn't foreigners; it was all English, and I thought, oh my God, now they're going to come and bully me again, and because at the time it was before Brexit, and people, especially from my nationality, weren't all that in favor. And then this guy had signed up who looked like a complete criminal. And I had this bulldog, and as I said, I do like bulldogs, but of course, the day before the meetup, have you ever had this, that when you're really afraid of something, there are all these stories that your brain comes up with? So anyway, so I'm sleeping and I'm dreaming that this guy comes with this bulldog, and then there's this little tiny woman with a pincher, and then the guy with the bulldog comes, and the bulldog is trying to eat the pincher, and I'm trying to pull them apart, and the pincher is half in the snout of the bulldog, and then the bulldog turns on me, and then the man turns on me, and then they drag us out into the woods. And it was, I mean, but it was so real. It was so real, and I almost didn't go. And then that morning it rained, and I thought, okay, another sign that I shouldn't be going. But no, if you can't, you must. I think that's something that Tony Robbins says as well. So if you can't, you must. So I was pumping myself up with incantations and all NLP tools that I'd ever learned. So I went to that meetup, and it's so ridiculous. There were 5 people there, right? I mean, what's to be afraid of? It's an English countryside. But anyway, so I'm going to that meetup, and turns out it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. Only no man showed up. No man with bulldog. It was 5 women, and we had a beautiful walk. And it turned out to be a really beautiful experience because I had gone out. I was still not really in that space where I needed to be later, which is going to be the first strategy. But at least I had gotten into a space where I was going out again, where I was opening up again. And it was a volunteering meetup. We volunteered in different places, or just, went to animal places. And it was a beautiful experience for 1 or 2 years. And then just when Brexit then happened, and I lost the money, and I ended up losing the house, and I ended up in a campground. I wasn't a camper at the time. I didn't know how they would receive animals, right? And so I thought, okay, I need a strategy. I need a new strategy. Then I need to do something else. And this reversing energy has worked, and especially when it was positive, finally had people who were helping. I finally found out about some animal places in the area, rescue places, which I didn't know about, because a lot of people in that area are afraid as well. And they don't publicize that they have a rescue place because they're afraid they're going to be attacked then. So it wasn't just me having these feelings, right? A lot of the single women who were living there, or who didn't have a partner around, were afraid also. So it was, I don't know why. It was more something in the air, but it was very intimidating to me at the time. Well, anyway, so going out had helped. And then I remembered the Gurkhas, and that's the first strategy.